Hello and welcome to the Famous Matches of Magic channel. Today we'll be presenting the matchup between Hans Jacob Goddik and Brian Pallas at the Vintage Championship Eternal Weekend 2022 quarterfinals. Before we get down to the match, let's take a look at the deck lists. Brian is piloting a Doomsday combo deck, playing 4 Doomsdays. The whole point of this deck is to resolve a Doomsday and then cast a Thassa's Oracle with 2 or less cards in the deck. Thassa's Oracle says when this resolves, if you have Devotion of Blue less than or equal to the number of cards in your library, you win the game. So you want to cast a Doomsday, get down to 5 cards, then you want to resolve, a Street Wraith, cycle, then cast a Thassa's Oracle. You also can cast a Gush to draw some cards for free. You can also cycle a Cataxian Probe for free. You can also draw Ancestral Recall to draw 3 cards. Anyway, the entire point of this deck is to resolve a Doomsday and win the game, usually holding some Force of Wills, Force of Negations, Dazes, lots of counterspells to back you up. Now Hans is playing a Jeskai control deck with Dreadhorde Arcanist, Ragavans, and Lavinia, along with counterspells in the form of Force of Wills, Force of Negations, Mental Misstep, Flusterstorm. It has some creature kill in the forms of Swords to Plowshares and Prismatic Ending. It has the usual cantrips of Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm. It has a couple of expressive iteration as well. It has the mana acceleration of the on-color Moxes, as well as Lotus and a Lotus Petal for acceleration. It has disruption in the form of Wasteland and Strip Mine. Also notable that it does run an actual Merchant Scroll, which is a little unique, as well as both Del spells in Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise, and Lurrus as a companion. Now that we know the deck lists, let's head down to the match. Alright, Hans Jacob Goddik is on the play and starts with a Mystery Rainforest. Let's see what he searches up here, and that's a Revised Tundra. Plays a Mox Ruby and an 8th edition Merchant Scroll. I much prefer the Homelands Merchant Scroll, but you go ahead and be the judge for yourself. They are both about the same price on cardkingdom.com right now. I'm looking and they're both $5, so you could play them both for the same price. I don't know why you wouldn't go with the original, but anyway, Brian plays a Misty Rainforest of his own and passes the turn back to Hans. He searched up an Ancestral, by the way. Brian is keeping track of life totals on his phone. And a full art Zendikar island for Hans. He could choose any island in the world, and he goes with full art Zendikar. And it looks like a Polluted Delta for Brian. Searching up an Underground Sea. And starts with a Preordain. I believe that is a top for Brian. Another Mox for Hans and a Wasteland. He immediately goes for the Underground Sea. Brian reluctantly puts it right into the graveyard, as Brian, I believe, only has 5 main decked mana producing lands, so Wastelands are devastating to him. Another Underground Sea. Looks like a full grip. I believe 7 cards for Brian. Doomsday is a dangerous deck, as at any time it can just come and win out of nowhere. It has lots of protection and lots of combo, so Hans has to be careful. Brian passes the turn and goes for the end of turn Ancestral Recall. Brian knew he had it, so he saw this coming. Is Brian going to fight over this? He goes with floating a mana and then returning an underground for a daze, followed by a Flusterstorm, all pointing at the Ancestral Recall. So that's Storm of Ancestral Recall, Daze, Flusterstorm. So that's 3-4 mana coming towards Ancestral Recall. So Brian is successful in countering Ancestral Recall. Hans goes for a Preordain of his own. He also goes top, followed by a Lavinia. Let's see if that Lavinia resolves, as that is pretty much impossible for Brian to win with it in play. He goes for a Demonic Consultation in response to Lavinia. Looks like he named Force of Will, and wow, it was the 7th card down. That's pretty darn lucky. So a Demonic Consultation for Force of Will. He lost his Ancestral Recall, which is kind of important for his Doomsday pile, and he Demonic Consultation for Force of Will to try to fight over that Lavinia, not letting that resolve. Let's see if that pricey Demonic Consultation pays off here. And he goes for the Force of Will, and what is he going to pitch? Looks like he's pitching a Thought Scour. And it pays off as that Lavinia hits the bin, and Brian lives to fight another day. He goes for another Underground Sea. Can he combo off here? Brian is a threat to win at any time with this Doomsday combo deck. Hans has to be afraid of that. Brian hits the tank. Taps 2 mana. Decides to go on 1. See the Doomsday in his hand, but instead he goes for the Vampiric Tutor, and it is a Visions Vampiric Tutor. Good job, Brian. I like your choice of cards. It is, 6th edition would be acceptable also. At least it is not one of those Masters Edition Vampiric Tutors. Brian knew exactly what he wanted, so that was pretty quickly. And then he, bam, is gushing. And he is going to pick up whatever he searched for right now. If I had to suspect, it would be Black Lotus, but I am not positive, as Brian appears to be keeping Storm count. And there is a Black Lotus, so it looks like he is going for the Doomsday right now. Will that Black Lotus resolve? It does. Will Doomsday resolve? Hans is now hitting the tank. What does Hans have? Does Hans have a Force of Will? And it appears not. So Doomsday is resolving. Brian is building his pile. And he passes the turn back to Hans. So Brian has no permanence. He just made a Doomsday pile. So what can Hans do? Can Hans stop Brian from winning next turn? He is at 7 life. No permanence. Hans goes for the treasure cruise. Wow, this is exciting. Will Brian be able to win here off of the Doomsday, or can Hans stop him? He drew 3 cards, so he's most likely going to get some permission or another Lavinia or, anything. Are we going to see a Ragavan dash to remove a card from the top of Brian's deck? Maybe a crucial card that's part of his combo to win? That would be interesting. Ragavan is a card that allows him to take a card off the top of his opponent's deck. And he gets to play it this turn. And that's exactly what we have. So he's getting in. What is the top card of Brian's deck? We're about to find out. Is it an important combo piece, or is it a Street Wraith? It is a Street Wraith, so Hans actually just helped Brian combo out, making his deck 1 smaller. Polluted Delta for Brian and pass. Brian had to build his deck perfectly, so Ragavan is probably going to get dashed again. So what is the next card? Brian, is it another Street Wraith? If so, Brian had played this game brilliantly. I mean, it seems very unlikely Brian is able to pull this out after everything that we have seen. Hans has drawn so many cards, dashing Ragavan, removing Brian down to 3. I mean, I don't see how Brian could possibly win this game, but let's find out if that Ragavan is going to come down again. Take another card off of Brian's deck. It does. What is the next goodie in store for Ragavan? And it is another Street Wraith. Wow, Brian. Woof. Goes down to 3. Bottom card is an island. Underground Sea. Thassa's Oracle. Does it resolve? Force of Will. Removing Ponder. Does Brian have a Force of Will? Oh, and Hans had 2 Force of Will backups. Brian only had one, so Brian did not manage to pull that out, but that was a nail biter. Brian built his pile pretty masterfully, if I had to say so, but he was not able to pull out game one. So game one goes to Jeskai Control, and Brian is on the play for game two. He has a Beta Max Sapphire and a Khans of Tarkir Flooded Strand. He is in the tank thinking, should he crack that Flooded Strand? Do something turn one. Should he go for it? You know, Doomsday can oftentimes go for turn one Doomsday, but it is risky because they could kill themselves. He sacks that Flooded Strand with a little smirk on his face. Looks like he might have Dark Ritual, Flooded Dark Ritual Doomsday with that smirk on his face. After that, going in the tank. Taps it. Oh, Black Border Dark Ritual. Looks like a beta. Turn one Doomsday. We got some action here. Hans is nervously scratching the back of his head. Let's see, his face is a little red. Ugh. He does a Forcible and Force of Negation, so he shows the Forcible, but we haven't seen the blue card. So he has to remove a Lavinia. Ooh, that's good. At least he had to remove a Lavinia. Lavinia is probably one of the best cards in Hans' deck, so we know Hans is really low on blue cards. Brian then follows it with a Preordain. Still a fantastic start for Brian. Volcanic Island and a Promotional Ponder. You know, I would just go with the Lauren Ponder myself, but you be the judge of which you think is better. M10 is also acceptable to me, as it has the three balls, you know, recognizing the three cards you're looking at, but I don't really like the M10 that much. I prefer Lauren. But I don't know what's really going on with that full art one, so I would just stick to the basics. He has to shuffle, did not like what he saw, grabs a random card, and passes the turn. Another Dark Ritual for Brian and a Necropotence from Ice Age. Nice. The Skull. Some of my favorite artwork on any Magic card. Doomsday just plays with so many cool, fun cards. Let's see if Necro resolves, and it looks like it is going to. It resolved a bunch of cards. Then he is sacrificing the Polluted Delta to look through his library and see what cards are removed. So when he sacrificed it, he got to look and see the cards that were removed from the game with Necro to the side and see if he wanted to draw any more cards. That's a cool little advanced Necropotence tip. And he decides, hey, I didn't get what I need, so let me add a few more. Maybe he didn't get a Force of Will, for example. Maybe he didn't get a Doomsday, for example. He saw all the Doomsdays in there. He saw all the Force of Wills in there, so he decided to Necro up to make sure he gets one, or, you know, has a much bigger probability of getting one. And he discards at the end of the turn, and all the discarded cards get removed from the game. Unfortunately, that is a big deal for Doomsday. Doomsdaying with a Necro in play is very cool. Also, he can just remove his entire deck from the game. Again, I'll put that up on the screen. So you can just remove your entire deck from the game, or a couple cards from the game, depending on your life total with Doomsday, to win off of Thassa's Oracle. So that's a pretty sweet interaction. It's pretty hard to beat a resolved Necro. You draw so many cards, so you know, if you can't win this one, Brian, I don't know if you can win any against Hans. Hans has a polluted Delta. Looks like he's going for a Dreadhorde Arcanist. But I think that is going to be way too slow if Brian can't go off next turn. I don't really know what more he needs. So he has 7 perfectly sculpted cards. He should have a couple counter spells. He should have a Doomsday. He should have some kind of instant draw so that he can go off immediately. He has 3 more off of Ancestral Recall, so that should put him to 9 cards in his hand, but he's going to skip a draw for Necro. He should have another black mana here, and he has a 3rd Underground Sea. Here should come the Doomsday. Or is this a Demonic Tutor for a Doomsday? It is, so it looks like a Demonic Tutor maybe for a Doomsday. Lotus. Sack the Lotus for a Doomsday, which gives him 2 extra mana, so that is a pretty big deal. So 2 games in a row with a resolved Doomsday. 1 failed, 1 that should be victorious. So if Brian can't win this game, then he's got some real problems with his deck. Preordain after the resolved Doomsday. Just draws a card. Gitaxian Probe looks at his opponent's hand. Sees a Brainstorm, Pyroblast, Dreadhorde Arcanist. So he has, looks like, I think just a Daze is all that his opponent has. 2 cards off of Brian. Lotus again. Now all he needs to do is cast Thassa's Oracle, and that is game 2 for Doomsday. We are on to game number 3, where Hans will be on the play. Can he resolve a Lavinia? That is the question. And he starts with an amazing turn 1 with a Gitaxian Probe. That just feels so unfair. You just get to see their hand and draw a card for free. That card just never should have been printed. That's just ugly. God, I hate that card. It's like my least favorite Magic card. And it is a snow-covered island in Brian's hand. Not really sure why he has a snow-covered island. Hans is carefully writing down his hand. And then starts with a Mox Sapphire. And that appears to be a black bordered Tundra. That's pretty cool. Don't believe we've seen that this match. And passes the turn. He could have had turn 1 Lavinia, but he did not, so that's good to know. Turn 1 snow-covered island is just so terrible because now he can't turn 3 Doomsday or turn 3 Necro without a Dark Ritual or a Lotus or a Mox. So the island, I played quite a bit of Doomsday in my day, and I just never really liked the island, honestly, in general. It's a necessary evil, but man, when you have to start with turn 1 island, it just hurts so much. And anyway, Hans, interestingly, does go with Flusterstorm on the island, and then now goes with the Lavinia. Oof. That is bad news for Brian, and he goes with Cycle Street Wraith. Wow. He really wants it a Forcible, and he obviously does not have it, and is forced to use 2 Street Wraiths to try to find it. And those Street Wraiths are very valuable because they get you to combo off right away. And he has a Forcible, and his only blue card is Ancestral Recall. And he decides not to use Forcible Ancestral Recall, but man, I would have used it personally. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I don't see any way that Brian can get rid of that Lavinia. And what good does 3 cards do if you can't cast any of your spells? So I think that was a mistake. I would have removed that Ancestor Recall as much as it hurts. No Gush, no Lotus, no Moxes. How is he going to win with Doomsday through a Lavinia? So, I mean, the only thing I can think of that he does have is if he brought in the Shield Druids as an alternate win condition. That is an option, but I mean, still, I would have, I don't know. I would have removed the Force of Will, removed the Ancestral Recall, but it is what it is at this point. He is going to go with Demonic Consultation. He could also Demonic Consultation, remove his entire library, and cast Thassa's Oracle. But he is using his Demonic Consultation here, so that will no longer be an option as well. So he is just cutting off all of his routes to victory. Not sure what he is naming. But it might not resolve anyway. He did name Shieldred, so he did bring those in, and once again, he has made a deal with the devil as it is the first card. So he named Shieldred, he got the Shieldred. I wonder, we saw Swords of Plowshares last game, I believe, so Hans did not take all of his creature removal out. Is a Wasteland coming for that Underground Sea? If so, that's going to be just devastating. We see a Surgical Extraction coming. What is it going to remove? Is it going to remove Dark Rituals? And it is going to remove Dark Rituals, and Brian had one in his hand, so he was going to go for Dark Ritual Shieldred. As Lavinia says, non-creature spells less than or equal to the lands you control. So he could have Dark Ritualed Shieldred next turn, but no longer can he do that. He does have another Underground Sea, 2 Force of Wills, but he does not have that many mana producing lands. He has 4 Underground Seas and 1 snow-covered island, and 1 snow-covered island in the board. So Wastelands and 4 colored mana spells. 4 mana spells are hard to do, especially when you can't cast Moxes either or Dark Rituals. So it's going to be hard to cast that Shieldred when you're playing against a Wasteland Strip Mine deck and you have no Dark Rituals or Moxes or Lotus. And Shieldred is your only route to victory. So Brian is going to be in an uphill battle. Oh, ouch. Brian. Misty Rainforest passes the turn. It seems silly, but when I played Doomsday, I always played a copy of Watery Grave on top of the 4 Underground Seas just because it's so important, and you really need mana lands that you can search up. You have so many sack lands, and you really want 3 black. You really don't want more islands. So yeah, we actually ran a Watery Grave in our build when we played at Vintage Champs Doomsday a couple years ago. All goes back to not Force of Willing the Lavinia and also leading with that snow-covered island. I think both of those were mistakes. Brian goes with a Preordain. So if I'm counting right, there are 2 Underground Seas in the graveyard, 2 in play, and 1 island. So that's all of his lands. So I don't believe he can even cast the shield grid anymore. I don't believe, unless he brought in the extra island, he can search up anything with that flooded strand. So I don't think he can cast the shield grid, because he can't cast any of the Moxes, the Lotus. Dark Rituals are removed. So I think Brian is pretty much drawing dead. Don't know why you don't run like one Chain of Vapor as a search target. I mean, we always did. Doesn't really make sense how you don't run one. You have tutors. You have Demonic Tutor, Vampiric Tutor. I don't understand why you wouldn't run one. But I mean, he made it to top 4 Vintage Champs, and I never have top 8 Vintage Champs. So what do I know? But you would just think you had room for one at least in the sideboard. Man, I would have kept that Demonic Consultation at least, also to go for the Demonic Consultation Thassa's Oracle win. That also could have been a possible win. So I just don't really like the way Brian has been playing this game. Hans just seems to be playing with his food at this point. There is that Ponder again. I think Brian is ready to extend that hand at any moment. He's just a defeated man. He knows there's nothing he can do. Lays out his second Thassa's Oracle. He gets to scry for 4. Those are 1/3, so they are keeping the Lavinia at bay. It'd be nice if Hans had some more pressure to put Brian out of his misery. Lavinia is doing some serious work. Demonic Tutor. And he looked through his deck with that Demonic Tutor and realized, yeah, there is absolutely nothing I can do. 3 Force of Wills, 2 Shield Grids, and Hans advances to the finals. Thank you so much for watching. Keep your lookout for more matches, and have a great day.